Hey you guys, Coach LT here coming at you with a quick video on 4 key reasons I see people pushing their punches and how you can deliver yours with explosive power. Let's get to it, shall we? Alright, so reason number 1 I see people pushing their punches when they could be delivering them with a lot more speed, a lot more power, and a lot better technique is they have a tendency to throw their punches without really having a proper foundation. This leads the fighter to falling into the punches as opposed to delivering the strike. So I would say a big one I see this on is when people are delivering, say, a jab or a hook. They have a tendency to let that back foot come off the ground, at which point they don't really have a whole lot of foundation. This tends to be when there's not proper hip movement and they're trying to close the gap and trying to reach for the target as opposed to closing the gap with the feet, keeping the feet under the punches, and then delivering the strike. So they'll lift the back foot up as they're delivering and sort of fall into the target. That doesn't really do a whole lot to your opponent, and it really just kind of sets you up to be in a bad place, open to any number of counterattacks or whatever. It makes you slower, and it takes a lot more time to get back to point A where you started so that you could deliver anything else. So you want to make sure you have a solid foundation, that your feet stay intact with the ground, unless of course you were doing a jumping maneuver, more advanced technique, that's different, whatever. Anyways, you want to make sure you have a solid foundation that's coming under your strike so that when you deliver, you're coming right back to where you started and you don't lose your balance, all right? Reason number 2 is a lack of lower body movement. So I am an absolute stickler for footwork. You cannot overstate the importance of having solid footwork in any combat sport, really any sport in general. Footwork is absolutely critical to maintaining balance, maintain speed, power, and really being on point with everything else. When there's no lower body movement, you're going to really start to see it affect, even just simple punches. You want to make sure you have the feet in the mix, hips in the mix. So one thing I see a lot of is a lack of lower body movement that ends up resulting in punches being delivered where the upper body is attempting to put power behind the punch, because if I'm here and I don't rotate, then I can't really generate anything. So a lot of people seeing that will start to push the upper body in while the lower body is more or less kind of locked out and stagnant. It's not really getting into the mix. So you see a lot of punches being pushed into the bag. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you have that lower body in the mix, that you're making sure that you turn the hips over into the strikes. You have proper ground force engagement, so when you deliver, you're in and out. Right? Lower body movement. Coming in and out. Reason number 3 is for even those that make it a point to incorporate the lower body movement, a lot of times there ends up being an issue with the timing or the muscle sequencing. So, if I was to hand you a ball, I tell my clients this a lot of times, if I was to hand you a ball and say, hey, will you throw this from here to across the room? You wouldn't start by throwing the ball and then pushing your body after it. Yet that's what you see a lot of people do when they throw strikes, where they're pushing the punches. If I'm delivering off the rear hand, for somebody who's pushing the punch, you might see that fist come out and it's already almost to the target before the hip even starts to rotate into it, if it even does. So what ends up happening is that push, you're trying to push the body behind the punch, and it's not going to deliver with the same kind of power as what you're going to get if you start by moving the feet into the proper position, turning the hips over into the strike, and then releasing the power with your fist or whatever you're striking with. So what you don't want is that improper sequencing and timing that says fist goes first and then I fall into the punch more or less, just pushing forward. That is not proper. If anything, that gets really exhausting and doesn't do a whole lot to your opponent. So we want to make sure that we are starting with the rotation of the hips, and it doesn't mean that it has to be way ahead of it. It's just a slight bit ahead of it, just enough that power is being chambered and loaded up before it's actually released. So when I turn that 2 over, I don't want to bring the fist over and then follow it with the hip. I'm going to let the hip lead the way, and I'm going to deliver that punch. Same thing if I'm coming in with a hook off of that rear hand. I want to make sure I'm not turning the hook and then bringing the hip over into it. I want to chamber the hip and load that power up in the hips, And it doesn't have to be very time consuming. Just a quick load up and turn that hip over into the strike. Let that hip turning over initiate the strike. All right. The last and final reason why I see a lot of people pushing their punches as opposed to delivering them with that beautifully explosive power is that they have a tendency to have a lazy retraction. So I would say, especially when we get used to doing a lot of bag work, we don't always practice bringing that fist back to guard. Even when I'm doing pad work, I see a lot of that where the hand will come out and then it just kind of drops. It's almost like people get more concerned about getting that punch to the target and not really worried about much after that. So you end up with a very lazy retraction. You should be practicing having a solid retraction, especially when you're warming up with like your shadow boxing. It's not just about getting it out there. You want to go A to B, B to A, right? If I'm throwing the jab, I don't want to get it out here and then just stop or drop. I want it to get out, come back, bring it back to home. So when you're throwing those punches, even when you're doing bag work, pad work, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you do not have a lazy retraction. You don't want to get it out there and then just kind of stick around and wait to see what happens next. This is going to leave you open for a lot of counterattacks. You're going to be just exposed to a lot of crap if you don't get that hand back into position. Make sure you don't have a lazy retraction. Get it out there, boom, boom, and get it back. So if I'm throwing a simple jab cross, I don't want to have that lack of retraction coming out, right? I want to get it in and out. All right, so there you have it. 4 simple reasons why you may or may not be pushing your punches and how you can start to deliver them with some explosive power. Make sure that you start off with a solid foundation. Have those feet positioned properly. Make sure that you are moving that lower body into action and using it to generate the power, not to follow in behind it, but to precede the strike by leading it up, chambering it up, loading it up, and make sure you get it up out there and back home. No lazy retractions. Point A to B, B to A. Get it back home. All right? Thanks for watching. Make sure that you give me a like, share, follow, comment, whatever you want. And I'll look forward to connecting with you guys here soon. All right?